What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this video, we're going to be bringing you another endgame build, this time for the longsword. Now what is an endgame build? Well, it's a build that is constructed from some of the rarest weaponry, armor and decorations in the game. They also feature curious crafting, but it's not to the extent where all the skills featured on the armor and the builds are unobtainable. Now, as always, if you find these videos helpful, informative, or even entertaining, please consider leaving a like on the video, as well as subscribing, as it really does help and allows me to bring you more builds for a variety of different playstyles. Now, when it comes to the longsword in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, it's a very powerful weapon. Thanks to the sheer number of counterattacks it has, it can normally forego defensive skills. Of course, this relies on a player's skill to actually perform the counterattacks, but with a little bit of time, you should be able to master the counterattacks, foregoing the need for defensive skills on your builds. On top of that, the longsword has some very useful silkbind attacks. The silkbind Sakura Slash allows you to not only deal damage, but also quickly charge up your longsword gauge. Or alternatively, you can perform the soaring kick that allows for massive damage. And this build is going to be focusing all around utilising our silkbind attacks to maximum effectiveness. So with that, I present to you the Frenzied Bloodlust longsword build. So for this endgame longsword build, you're going to need the following. First of all, you'll need the Risen Kushala Glare, then the Tempest Robe, and then 3 pieces of the Risen Shagaru Magala armor, so the Virtue Braces, Virtue Coil, and the Virtue Greaves. At least the Virtue set will be for the male hunters. If you're using a female hunter, it will be the Prudence set. But the name and appearance are the only differences here. Now when it comes to your Petalace, I always say these are down to personal preference. I'd recommend either the Demon Petalace for some extra damage, or the Absolute Petalace as I'm using here for some extra health. As for your Talisman, now the Talismans in Title Update 5 and beyond, they can make or break builds. But I'd recommend going for a talisman that has as much attack boost on it as possible, as well as decoration slots. The talisman I'm using also has the bonus of having maxed out Bubble Dance. Finally, as for your weapon, there are 2 choices I'd recommend here. First of all, I'd recommend going for the Chaos Longsword, which is the Chaotic War Magala Longsword. This obviously has the effect of going from negative to positive affinity when we overcome Bloodlust, and as this build is focused around the Frenzied Bloodlust and the normal Bloodlust skill, we can make use of this buff. Or alternatively, I'd recommend the Amatsu Longsword, which gives us decent raw attack and increases the damage of our silkbind moves as well. Finally, for the curious crafting on the weapon, I'd recommend going for increasing the weapon's raw attack most of all. So when it comes to the decorations, you've got a fair few to play around with. So first of all, I've gone for a chain jaw for a point in the burst skill. This is optional. I've then gone for intrepid jaws to get intrepid heart to level 2. To be honest, you only really need 1 point in this. I've then gone for anti-wyvern jaws for the rampage decoration. You can go with any of the anti-species jaws to increase our raw attack a little bit when fighting certain monsters. I've then gone for a Wirebug jaw to max out Wirebug Whisperer, critical jaws to max out critical boost, shockproof jaws for the shock absorber skill, expert jaws to increase our critical eye, crisis jaws, which are optional technically. I've only taken crisis jaws because we have bubble dance. If you don't have bubble dance, you can drop the crisis jaws. Crisis jaws basically give us the resuscitate skill. I've then gone for attack jaws to max out attack boost, a Spirit Bird Core jaw for a point in the Spirit Bird Core skill, sheave jaws to max out quick sheave, and then finally a jumping jaw for a point in evade extender. But this one is another optional one in all honesty. So if you don't know what I've done here, you have fluctuating statuses. Your raw attack by default will be 469 with a dragon rating of 52. This can, like I said, fluctuate depending on what scroll you are using, as well as certain other buffs. Your affinity will be negative 30% when Bloodlust is building up, but when you overcome Bloodlust, it will increase to 40%. This can be a maximum of 90% when you take into account skills like Critical Eye and Weakness Exploit. And you'll have a fluctuating defense, which by default is 934. That is strong against water and ice, but unfortunately weak to the other elements, especially dragon. Now as for the switch skills, this build works best with the Silkbind Sakura Slash. That's really the only one I'd advise really taking. The rest are down to personal preference. For me personally, the Silkbind Sakura Slash and the Sacred Sheath combo are what I mainly like to use with this build. So, as for the skills, first of all you have attack boost at level 7, increasing the raw attack of this build, and at level 4 or above grants us a percentage bonus to our raw attack. You'll then have Critical Eye at level 5. It would have been nice to get this higher in all honesty, but Critical Eye at level 5 is still nice and helps counter that negative affinity on the Chaotic War Magala Longsword. Anyway, next up is Resuscitate at level 3, which is a skill that increases our raw attack when we're suffering from an abnormal status. Now the main reason we've taken this isn't necessarily because of Bloodlust, but I've taken it because of Bubble Dance, which we can apply to our hunter quite often to increase our raw attack. Anyway, next up is Critical Boost at level 3, which is a skill that increases the damage of our attacks when they crit a monster, but only applies to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental or ailment portions. Next up is Weakness Exploit at level 3, which is a skill that increases our affinity by up to 50% when we're attacking monster weak points. Next skill is Quick Sheath at level 3, which increases how quickly we can sheath our weapon, and it does apply to the Sacred Sheath combo and the Special Sheath for the longsword. You'll then have Bubble Dance at level 3, which may not be for all of you. Bubble Dance is a skill that reduces the effects of Bubble Blight on a hunter, so we won't slip and slide all over the place. On top of that, we can manually activate this by dodging and evading numerous times, to which activating Bubble Dance will also activate Resuscitate, granting us that bonus attack. Bubble Dance also increases your dodge capabilities and iframes when evading, when the debuff or buff is active. Anyway, next up is Wirebug Whisperer at level 3, reducing the cooldown on our wirebugs, as well as how long we can hold additional wirebugs. One of the key skills for this build in all honesty. Next up is Bloodlust at level 3, another key skill for this build. Bloodlust is a skill that gives us a modified version of the Frenzy virus. You'll see a little purple health bar filling up above our normal health bar. The Frenzy virus will also drain our health whilst it's filling up. Whilst this is happening, we'll gain increased raw attack, evasion capabilities and reduced stamina usage. However, should we let that bar fill up, we'll be debuffed instead, indicated by a red icon, to which we will take a lot more damage from monsters. However, we can fight off the effects of the Frenzy virus by dealing enough damage to a monster, to which we will be healed for the health that the Frenzy virus has drained from our hunter and gain increased affinity. You can also control the Bloodlust Frenzy virus bar by using Nullberries, but for the most part it's better to just fight the Frenzy virus off. And fighting the Frenzy virus off will also coincide with one of the main skills of this build, Frenzied Bloodlust, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Anyway, the next skill is Wind Mantle. Wind Mantle at level 3 is a skill that, when using a Silkbind attack, it will boost our Wirebug gauge recovery. Landing continuous attacks will also increase the effect, but will wear off once you sheath your weapon. However, it doesn't apply to the Sacred Sheath combo or the Special Sheath with the longsword, only your normal sheath. Anyway, next up is Frenzied Bloodlust at level 3, which is the namesake of this build, which after fighting off the effects of the Frenzy virus, we will temporarily gain an additional Wirebug. However, should you sheath your weapon, whilst you have this additional Wirebug, the effect's duration decreases drastically, so be aware of that. But as you can see, Wirebug Whisperer, Bloodlust, Wind Mantle and Frenzied Bloodlust all synergize well with one another and gives us what this build is all about. With these skills you can have pretty much up to 4 Wirebugs at any one point, and be able to spam the Silkbind Sakura Slash over and over again, allowing you to perform the Sacred Sheath combo very quickly, leading to a lot of damage output. Next up is Intrepid Heart at level 2, which potentially you only need it at level 1. This is a skill that gives us another bar above our health bar, a little blue bar that fills up as we attack a monster. Should we fill this bar up, then the next attack we take from a monster that would knock our hunter back, the damage reaction is completely ignored, we will take reduced damage, and at level 2 an explosion will occur on our hunter, damaging the monster that hit us. So it's a nice little defensive skill. It also works well with the Heaven Sent skill, which we'll talk about in a moment. Next up is Evade Extender at level 1, increasing the distance at which we evade and dodge and such. Is a quality of life skill. You can drop this if you wanted to. Next is Mail of Hellfire, which is a risky glass cannon skill, but I still like to use it at least at level 1. This basically, when we're using the red scroll, will decrease our defense but increase our raw attack, but while using the blue scroll will decrease our elemental resistances but increase our elemental attack. So you can drop this if you're feeling unsafe when using this build. Anyway, next up is Redirection at level 1. This is a byproduct of the Krios crafting. It's not really needed that much, to be honest. When you perform a perfectly timed switch skill just as a monster attacks, the damage is reduced. Next up is Spirit Call at level 1. It's a quality of life skill that I tend to take for most builds in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Basically, this allows us to receive the effects of random spirit birds at fixed intervals. It just reduces the need to go out of your way to gather spirit birds manually. Anyway, next up is Burst at level 1, which is a skill that after we continuously land attacks on a monster, it will gradually increase our raw attack and elemental attack. You'll then have Heaven Sent at level 1, which is a skill that activates when we've not taken damage whilst in combat against a large monster. We can tell this by the whirlwind around our hunter, to which after Heaven Sent is active, it will decrease the damage we take from a monster for one hit that would knock us back, as well as reduce our stamina consumption. On top of that, when Heaven Sent is active, should we perform a switch skill swap, it will recover some of our sharpness. And then finally is Shock Absorber at level 1. This is a quality of life skill for when playing multiplayer. Basically, it disables the damage reactions when you hit a friend or a friend hits you. So there we have it, those are all the skills related to this Frenzied Bloodlust longsword build. Let's move on to the next section where we talk about the curious crafting. Now, as this is an endgame build, it will feature curious crafting, but thanks to the sheer number of decorations we can craft, you can make adjustments to produce similar results to this build, even if you don't get this exact same curious crafting as is shown here. But for the Risen Kushala Glare, I've got a point in the Wind Mantle skill, but a reduction in the Wirebug Whisperer skill. For the Tempest Robe, I've got a tier 2 decoration slot upgrade. For the Virtue Braces, I've got a point in Weakness Exploit. For the Virtue Coil, I've got a point in the Mail of Hellfire skill. And then finally for the Virtue Greaves, I've got a point in Redirection, Wind Mantle, but a reduction in the Strife skill. To be honest, when it comes to this build, the main skills that you really need to aim for are Wind Mantle and Mail of Hellfire. The rest can be pretty much achieved through decorations and other means. But every build out there, even these endgame builds, they all come with pros and cons. No build is absolutely perfect. Even the meta builds, they come with downsides. They may be difficult to craft or rely on curious crafting too much. When it comes to this build, its biggest pro is its Silkbind attacks. Thanks to being able to maintain up to 4 Wirebugs for a decent duration of time, it means you're able to spam skills like the Silkbind Sakura Slash, resulting in a ton of burst damage when it comes to this build. On top of that, this next pro is this build's damage output. Whilst maybe not the highest damage output a longsword build can achieve, it's still nonetheless high enough to bring down monsters in a relatively decent time. And the final pro is that this build actually has quite a few quality of life and defensive skills. I know I said at the start of the video that the longsword doesn't really need defensive skills, but this build has it anyway. Evade Extender, Intrepid Heart at level 2, Bubble Dance, and even Heaven Sent at level 1. These will all add to your survivability when you're on a hunt. But of course there are cons. There are 2 major cons for this build, the first being there is a health drain aspect to this build in the Bloodlust skill, and unfortunately the other con for this build is it's again another decoration heavy build that also relies on curious crafting. So it may not be obtainable to everyone out there, but it's one to strive for if you're looking for an interesting build anyway. And so that's the Frenzied Bloodlust longsword build. Definitely one I'd recommend trying out if you like the longsword, especially if you like the Silkbind Sakura Slash and the Sacred Sheath combo. It may be a little bit tough to craft, but the results can be worth it. It feels at times like you have almost infinite Wirebugs to use. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you another endgame build, this time for the longsword in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.